At 8:32 a.m., on a quiet spring morning, an entire mountainside collapsed in seconds. There were no warning sirens, no countdown. One American town had only minutes to escape from the most powerful volcanic eruption in U.S. history. This is the story of the volcano that buried a town and shocked the entire nation. For over a century, Mount St. Helens stood as a peaceful giant in Washington state. It was a picture-perfect postcard of the American Northwest. Generations of families looked at its snowy peak and saw beauty, not danger. It was scenic. It was calm. And to most, it was considered completely harmless. The nearby towns were built on that belief. Communities like Spirit Lake were filled with normal, everyday life logging camps, fishing lodges, families, schools. Kids played in yards with a view of the beautiful mountain. Few people truly believed that this majestic peak could ever pose a real threat. That deeply held belief, passed down through generations, would soon prove deadly. In the spring of 1980, the peaceful mountain began to stir. The first signs were subtle, easy to dismiss. Small earthquakes, just little tremors at first, started shaking the ground. Then, steam vents began to hiss from the summit, melting snow and ice. Most alarmingly, a huge bulge started growing on the mountain's north face, pushing outward several feet every single day. It was like a balloon being slowly, but relentlessly, inflated from within. Scientists from the U.S. Geological Survey rushed to the scene. They set up monitors and took measurements, and their data told a clear story. Pressure was building to a dangerous level. They issued warnings, urging for evacuations. But their warnings were met with skepticism. Evacuation zones were established, but they were limited. Some residents outright refused to leave their homes, frustrated by the restrictions. To them, the mountain had always been there, and it would always be there. They believed they had time. They didn't. On Sunday, May 18, 1980, the moment everything changed arrived without a final warning. An earthquake triggered the massive bulge to collapse, unleashing the biggest landslide in recorded history. But this wasn't a typical eruption that shoots straight up. Instead, Mount St. Helens exploded sideways. An immense, superheated cloud of ash, rock, and gas, a pyroclastic flow blasted outward at hundreds of miles per hour, faster than any hurricane on Earth. It ripped across the landscape, vaporizing everything in its path. Entire old-growth forests were flattened in mere seconds. Trees snapped like toothpicks for miles around. The blast cloud raced toward the nearby communities. For those closest to the mountain, the time for debate was over. They had only minutes to react, to run for their lives. For the people on the ground, it was a desperate race against a force of nature they couldn't comprehend. Cars sped down packed, two-lane roads, trying to outrun the monstrous churning cloud of darkness that was swallowing the sky behind them. Families grabbed whatever they could, shoving children and pets into vehicles before flooring the gas pedal. Some drivers, looking in their rearview mirrors, saw the cloud gaining on them, an apocalyptic wall of ash just moments from overtaking them. Within minutes, day turned into an eerie, suffocating darkness. Ash, thick and heavy, began to fall like a grim gray snow, piling up inches deep. The air became choked with fine particles, making it nearly impossible to breathe. Visibility dropped to zero. For many towns in the direct path of the eruption, there was no escape. They were about to be completely buried. When the ash finally settled days later, the world that had existed just hours before was gone. Homes had vanished, crushed and buried under feet of ash and mud. Roads, bridges, and familiar landmarks were completely erased from the map. Entire areas were unrecognizable, transformed into a barren, gray, lunar-like wasteland. The vibrant green forests were gone, replaced by a silent, desolate landscape of downed trees and hardened mudflows. Spirit Lake, once a pristine mountain jewel, was now a steaming, debris-choked pool. The Tuttle River Valley was filled with a deposit of volcanic material hundreds of feet thick. Mount St. Helens had not just erupted. It had fundamentally rewritten the geography of the American Northwest in a matter of hours. A town, a lake, and a way of life were simply gone. The news and shocking images spread across the globe. America had never seen a volcanic disaster of this magnitude on its own soil. The sheer scale of the devastation was hard to comprehend. Television screens showed a gray alien world where thriving forests and communities once stood. The eruption had a ripple effect far beyond Washington state. Ash clouds drifted eastward, grounding air travel across the country. In cities hundreds of miles away, like Spokane, the sky went dark in the middle of the afternoon, forcing streetlights to turn on. The eruption became a national wake-up call. It was a turning point for how the country viewed natural disasters. It fundamentally changed disaster preparedness, sparked a revolution in volcanic monitoring, and rewrote the playbook on emergency evacuation planning forever. So, why does this story from 1980 still matter so much today? Because the lessons from Mount St. Helens are still saving lives. Before this eruption, volcano monitoring in the U.S. was limited. Today, a sophisticated network of sensors, GPS stations, and satellites watches over every potentially active volcano in the nation. These early warning systems exist directly because of the tragedy at Mount St. Helens. The event forced scientists and officials to confront the reality that even dormant volcanoes can awaken with terrifying speed and force. The lives that were saved during subsequent eruptions, like those at Mount Pinatubo in the Philippines, were saved in part because of the hard lessons learned right here in Washington state. It proved that respecting nature's power and heeding scientific warnings is not a matter of choice. It is a matter of survival. In the end, it was a story of immense power and profound loss. One mountain exploded. One town disappeared. 57 people lost their lives. And America learned a lesson it would never forget, that the world we live in can be reshaped in an instant. And sometimes, nature gives no second chances. Thank you for watching. If you found this story powerful, consider subscribing for more deep dives into the events that shaped our world.